That is a PCV valve. What is a PCV valve? Let me explain it to you, hopefully. PCV stands for positive crankcase ventilation. And that sounds super scary, right? Like, what's a crankcase? What's ventilation? What does that even mean? And why haven't I run one before? And why did they include them in the first place? When you're rotating assembly and your engine is spinning around super fast, it's building pressure inside the crankcase, inside the block, inside the entire engine. It's building pressure like an air compressor. That pressure needs to vent somewhere. The crankcase needs to be vented or else it'll just explode. Or it provides resistance to the rotating assembly spinning and making power. So most engines have what they call a breather. That is a breather. It goes in your valve cover, and oil and gases and fumes and pressure release from this breather right here. So it'll breathe and vent the crankcase. A PCV valve also vents the crankcase, but it uses engine vacuum, and it actually pulls a vacuum on the crankcase. So instead of it being just at whatever pressure it happens to be whenever it's vented, so probably atmospheric pressure or very close to it, instead of being that pressure, it's going to be a vacuum. It's actually going to pull a vacuum on the crankcase, which helps your gaskets not leak because there's no pressure on the inside of the engine. It uses engine vacuum to pull a vacuum on the crankcase. That's what a PCV valve does. So why did I not run one before, and what made me change my mind about it? If you just want your crankcase to be at atmospheric pressure, essentially, having a breather in both of your valve covers will suffice. Your engine can breathe, and, it'll run just fine. I guarantee it forever. Run just fine forever. Your oil might be dirty. That's what the old guys say, anyway. I never experienced that myself, but, it is what it is. Your oil might get dirtier by not having a positive crankcase ventilation. But your engine will run just fine with two breathers, one breather. Two breathers is better, but, you have to vent your crankcase somehow. The number one reason I put this PCV valve in is because the oily fumes that come out of it smell bad whenever it's hot and you're at a stoplight. Because all those fumes end up in my cab somehow, even though the firewall doesn't have that many holes in it, and the cowl is mostly closed all the time when I'm driving it. So I don't know why it does that exactly, but I can always smell it. It smells like oil, essentially. I don't know how else to describe the smell. If you smelled it before, you'll know. I did not like that smell very much. So instead of all of the pressure going out the vents, it now gets sucked down the intake. And what you could do, and what they did from the factory, would take a breather and hook it up to the air cleaner. The breather would then vent to the air cleaner, and then you'd have even less fume smell. But because I have that open element air cleaner, can't do that quite as easy. But that's okay. One PCV valve is going to be way better than having two breathers. The other reason to run a PCV valve is by pulling a vacuum on the crankcase, it actually promotes ring seal. The rings will actually, supposedly, I can't tell you I've seen it myself, but supposedly the rings will seal better against cylinder walls, and you could potentially make more power. So why didn't I do this before? The number one reason I didn't do it before was because in my mind, an engine breathing in oily, crappy, gassy air does not make horsepower. You want clean, cold air mixed with your fuel to make good horsepower. That's why I never hooked it up before. But I've been daily driving it more than racing it, obviously, and, it's a daily driver. It's not a race car, so I just decided I was old enough and mature enough to install a PCV valve. So anyway, guys, that is why I installed it. I'm not saying you should, but I'm just saying this is my experience with it. It was super easy install. I can even give you guys a part number in the description of the parts that I bought for this 4390 FE. The grommet and the PCV valve I both got from Amazon. You could get them other places, I'm sure, but the valve was $6 and the grommet was 12, I think, or 15. So I have not driven it yet since I installed it, but it does work. One thing to note, it will lean out your carburetor just a little bit. I'll let you guys know I think of the PCV valve here in a week, but that is why I did it. I would recommend that you should do it on your daily driver. They did it from the factory on these cars. This car had one from the factory, so obviously Ford had a reason for it. So anyway, Hope you guys enjoy this video, and we'll see you next time on It'll Run, where we'll be back to working on the 390 from the truck. It's all apart, and we got some rings on order for it, so we'll put it back together with some pressure rings and a little bit of a hone. And we'll see you guys next time on It'll Run.